Hello and welcome back to my channel. I made my first video on this channel about an exam called Certified in Cybersecurity by ISC2. That's a free exam provided by ISC2 under the pledge they have taken for 1 million CC certifications. In this video, we will be covering the first chapter of that exam, which is Security Principles, which covers topics currently visible on the screen. Well, if you are new to this channel, I am Piyush, a cybersecurity engineer based out in UK, and I am trying to share my experiences which can help someone else. The first topic which comes under security principles is CIA Triad. You may have seen a lot of videos around CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability. What are those? But we'll try to cover these topics in a different way. To understand the concept of CIA Triad, we'll be taking an example of a story where three guards are trying to protect a royal treasure. These three guards are Jack, Bob, and Mike. So, our first guard is Jack. His responsibility was to ensure that this royal treasure was only accessed by the authorized people. To ensure that only authorized people can access the royal treasure, Jack used to ask everyone a secret passphrase before entering into the chamber, and then only the person would be allowed to access the treasure. Jack is the protector of confidentiality. Now, the concepts which comes under confidentiality are access control and encryption. You can think of access control of authentication and authorization. Let's say your Facebook account or Instagram account. Once you enter your username and password, then only you are able to access it. If anyone else enters their username password or a wrong username password, they are not authorized to access your account. That basically relates to the concept of confidentiality. The other example would be encryption. To take an example of encryption, let's say if you are working from home and you need to access something inside your organization, you use the VPN username and password provided by your organization. This VPN access basically protects you from the hackers present on internet. These hackers cannot see what you are trying to access. Now coming to our next guard, which is Mike. Mike used to ensure that nobody tampers the royal treasure or change it with something else. Let's say there are gold coins inside the treasure. Nobody else comes inside the treasure and change it to steel coins or maybe something else. Mike had a button inside the chamber where royal treasure was stored, and with this button, he was able to ensure that royal treasure is not tampered. This is exactly the concept of integrity, where we ensure that the data transferring from one node to another is not getting tampered or changed during the transit. Mike was the protector of integrity. Few concepts which comes under integrity are hashing and version controlling. Hashing, you can think of it like when you are sending a, let's say, vulnerability scan report to your client, and you want to ensure that none of the contents gets changed during the transit process or when it is received by the client. What you will be doing is you will be creating a hash of the report and will be attaching that in the email where you send the report, and when the client receives it, they would be able to verify that report is not tampered by calculating the hash again when it is received on their end. Last guard of the story is Bob. Bob's responsibility is to ensure the availability of the royal treasure all the time whenever someone needs it. It used to protect it from the attacks which can make the royal treasure inaccessible for some of the users. The last guard, Bob, was the protector of availability. Some of the examples which would come under availability is high availability. So that one node is down, the other node can be used to serve the data or the information. Next concept which comes under security principle is authentication. Process of verifying and validating the user's identification is known as authentication. There are three common methods which can be used in authentication. Something you know, like a password or PIN, something you have, like a identity card or your badge reader, not the badge reader, the badge. And the last one is something you are, maybe your fingerprint or the face ID. these can be used as the methods of authentication. Now, commonly, there are two major types of authentication: single factor authentication or the multi-factor authentication. In the multi-factor authentication, you combine two of the methods which we discussed just now. Next one is non-repudiation. Non-repudiation is a legal term, and basically it ensures nobody falsely denies that they have not performed an action. I think the better example to understand non-repudiation would be a banking scenario. Sarah logs into her banking account to make a fund transfer. To log in into the account, she uses her username and password and goes to the fund transfer section. Once she is in the fund transfer section, she is asked for an OTP when she finalizes the transfer. Now, the OTP, the username, password, the transfer details are logged in the banking system. Now, if Sarah denies that she did not initiate this transfer, banking companies can validate their logs and verify that whether it was performed by Sarah or not, because the OTP, username, and password are something which only belongs to Sarah and only Sarah has access to it. These records serves as evidence that only Sarah has initiated the transfer. Alright, next is privacy. Privacy is a right of an individual to control the distribution of an information which relates to themselves. While security and privacy both goes hand in hand in terms of protecting the personal data, but there is a difference between them. With the increasing rate at which data is getting collected nowadays, privacy and the regulations around it are getting mandatory for most of the organizations worldwide, and complying to these policies has become essential for the organizations, because sometimes breach of these policies can lead to monetary fines. Now, to understand the concept of privacy, we'll be taking an example of Emma, who is a 32-year-old graphic designer visiting her doctor. Now, when she visits her doctor, she shares personal information like the medications she is taking, her lifestyle habits, and the medical history. Emma trusts that this information will be protected by the hospital. Now, as we said, privacy and security both are concerned to protect the sensitive data or the personal data. In this case, security would be protecting Emma's data within an encrypted database, which protects it from unauthorized access, breaches, and cyber threats. On the other hand, privacy is something: who can access Emma's data? It should be only her doctor which should be able to access the data and nobody else. So privacy is concerned more around who can access your personal data. Privacy include policies on data sharing, data consent, and how your data will be processed. And the user should have the ability to request the deletion of their information as well. Alright, now comes the meaty part of this whole video, which is risk management. Risk management itself is a vast topic and cannot be covered in a short video, but we'll be covering it on a high level, how risk management works in an organization. So, risk management in information security involves identifying, assessing, and prioritizing the risk related to information assets of the organization, also to mitigate and manage those risks. This is the whole process of risk management. The goal is to protect the CIA while minimizing potential negative impacts on the organization. Now, the first step in the risk management process is identifying the risk. To identify the risk, we need to look at various aspects, maybe network vulnerabilities, environmental factors, employee behavior, and potential external threats like cyber attacks. Examples of risk would be data breach due to a weak password, malware attacks on the company's website, physical theft of the servers inside the data center. Once we have identified the risk, we need to assess them on the basis of the impact and the likelihood, which would help us in the later phases of risk management where we prioritize the risk. To assess the risk, you can think of an example where a banking company would rate a credit card information breach as a high risk and loss of a work laptop of an employee as a low risk. This is how we assess the risk in the organization. Once we have identified and assessed the risk, we need to prioritize these risks on the basis of the impact they have. Again, taking an example of a banking client, the first priority for them would be protecting the customer's credit card information. The lowest priority would be to protect the employee's work laptop. So on a high level, we first identify the risk, then assess the risk, and then we prioritize the risk. Now the next two phases are more towards the remediation of the risk and monitoring the risk. The next phase would be mitigating the risk. There are four ways of mitigating the risk. First one is mitigation, then we have acceptance, avoidance, and transfer. To understand these four types, we will be taking an example of an application inside the company which uses a .NET version which is vulnerable. Now, mitigation would directly focus on the remediation part of the vulnerability. If we have a patch available for that particular .NET version, and we applied that, this process would lie under the mitigation part. Whereas let's say the .NET version was completely out of support and no patch is available for it, but the company still wants to use it. In that case, company would be accepting the risk. This is known as risk acceptance. Now to understand the third part, which is risk avoidance, let's say the company can avoid using this application and stop hosting this in their environment. This would be risk avoidance. And the last one is risk transfer. Risk transfer is mostly focused towards the insurance or third party transfer of the risk. Let's say if a company has a cyber insurance, and in terms of a cyber threat on this particular application, some compromise happens, they have an insurance which would be compensating for their risk. Now next is security controls. Security controls relates to the physical, administrative, and technical controls which acts as a countermeasures or safeguards for the information assets inside the organization. Now the goal is to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the information assets. The implementation of these controls should get the risk hopefully to an accepted level inside the organization. Now let's understand what are these controls. Physical control address process-based security with the use of physical components. Let's say if you have a badge reader or ID card reader on the entry gate of your office, that would be a part of a physical control. They typically provide ways of controlling, directing, and preventing the movement of people inside the physical location, such as an office or factory or any other facility. Now, what are technical controls? Technical controls are those security controls that computer systems and networks can directly implement. You can think of it as network firewall, anti-malware system on the endpoints. These all are the example of the technical controls. These controls can provide automated protection from unauthorized access or misuse, facilitate detection of security violations, and support security requirements for applications and data. Technical controls can be configuration settings or parameters stored as data managed through a software where you can manage it through a central GUI, or they can be the hardware settings with the switches, routers, and the firewalls. Now last one is the administrative controls. Administrative controls are more of the guidelines or advisories within an organization which provide frameworks, constants, and standards for human behavior and should cover the entire scope of the organization's activities and its interactions with external parties and stakeholders. You can think of administrative controls as login banners or warning boards outside the office environment. These all are the example of administrative controls. Now another topic which comes under security principles is understanding the governance elements. These governance elements are regulations, standards, policies, and procedures. Any business or organization exists to fulfill a purpose, whether it is to provide manufacturing equipment or raw materials to an industry, develop develop software applications, construct buildings, or provide goods and services. To complete the objectives requires the decisions are made, rules and practices are defined, and policies and procedures are in place to guide the organization towards the common goal. Now, to understand regulation, you can think of regulations as local laws which are imposed by regional government or the local government where the business is operating. To take an example, you can think of GDPR. Every company which is operating in the EU region, they need to comply with GDPR. Often with regulations, if you don't comply with them, there are monetary fines as well. Regulations are more of the laws or rules to perform the business in a particular area or the region. Regulations can cover a wide range of areas, including financial practices, environmental practices. Example of regulation would be GDPR. Now, what is standards? Organizations can use multiple standards as their directives as part of their information security programs. Both as compliance documents, standards covers a broad range of issues and ideas that an organization is operating with policies and procedures that supports the regulations and are widely accepted best practices. You can think of standards as CIS benchmarks. Now, what is policy? Policy is basically to understand what standards or guidelines the company would be following. It establishes context and sets out strategic direction and priorities. Policies are used to moderate and control decision making within the organization. If you want to take an example for a policy, you can think of a password policy inside the or a information security policy inside your organization, which basically directs you how to comply with information security standards and guidelines which your company follows. Procedures are the exact steps which you need to follow to comply with the policies. So as we were taking example of a password policy, what step you need to take, whatever is mentioned in the password policy would be mentioned in a procedure document. The last topic of this video is ISC2 Code of Conduct. Now, to remember ISC2 Code of Conduct, you can remember this acronym which is called PAPA. The first code of conduct is protect society and infrastructure. Now, to take an example of this, let's say an information security analyst discovered a vulnerability in a government authority website. He would be reporting that immediately to relevant authorities so that they can fix them. Second is act honestly and responsibly. Now, as a security consultant, you find that there has been a breach inside your organization. Instead of hiding that breach, you need to immediately report it to the management so they can take relevant actions. Third is providing competent service. An information security analyst would always upgrade their skills, would attend conferences to stay updated with the latest threats and the security mechanisms out there. Last is advance and protect the profession. You need to always update your skills as well as you need to guide others in the field who wants to enter. As an experienced security professional, you need to mentor newcomers into the field. This is the last point in the ISC2 code of conduct. Yeah, that's it for this video. This covers on the high level the first chapter of Certified in Cybersecurity, which is security principles. I will put the link in the description to register and take this exam. I would highly encourage you to take the exam. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for more videos, and we'll be covering the later chapters in Certified in Cybersecurity very soon.